Cat stopped, recognizing his family. What the vet discovered left them in tears. There is a moment, and every person who has loved a cat long enough has had it, where the animal looks at you and something is gone. Not the body. The body is right there, warm, breathing, moving around the kitchen the same as always. But the eyes are different. They are looking at you the way they look at a stranger in the yard. Cautious, uncertain, like you are a thing to be assessed, not a person to be trusted. And you stand there in your own house, in the kitchen where you have fed this animal every morning for 9 years, and you feel it, that wrongness, that quiet terror of being looked through by someone who used to know you. That is what happened to the Merritt family in the spring of 2019. Their cat's name was Biscuit. He was a 9-year-old orange tabby, the kind of cat people describe as a personality before they describe a pet. He had opinions about which chair was his. He had a sound he made when he wanted the back door open that was different from the sound he made when he was hungry. And the family had learned the difference over years, the way you learn the difference in a child's cry. He followed their youngest daughter, a girl named Clara, from room to room in the evenings. He slept at the foot of their bed. He was, in the way of cats who have decided to allow it, theirs completely. And then one morning he woke up, and he did not know them, not all at once. It was not a switch that flipped in the night, though that is almost how it felt. It was more like a slow retreat over the course of a few weeks, so gradual that the family kept telling themselves they were imagining it. The way he startled when Clara reached for him, where he used to lean into her hand. The way he pressed himself against the wall when her father walked down the hall, when he had always come forward to be stepped over. Small things, easily explained away. A bad mood, a strange smell on someone's jacket from outside. Cats have their days. We give them their days without question because we have always given them their days and it has always been fine before. But the days kept coming. By the 3rd week, Biscuit had stopped sleeping on the bed. By the 4th, he would not come when called. By the 5th, he had found a spot behind the dryer in the laundry room and he was spending most of his hours there. And when anyone reached in to touch him, he made a sound that none of them had ever heard from him before. A low, warning sound. The sound of an animal in a strange place. Not a home. Not the sound of a cat who has made himself comfortable in an odd corner. Something different. Something smaller and more frightened underneath it. Clara's mother, whose name was Diane, sat down on the laundry room floor the evening of the 5th week and she said out loud to a cat she could not see, "What happened to you?" And the cat did not answer. Because cats do not answer. But the question hung there in the warm laundry room air, and she did not sleep well that night. They took him to the vet the next morning. I want to tell you what the vet found, and I will get there. But first, I want to tell you something that the Merritt family did not know, something that most people do not know, because understanding the condition is the only way to understand what happened inside that animal and why it matters as much as it does. Not just for cats, for every animal in your house that is getting older, and for your own family members who are getting older besides, and for reasons that go beyond any single creature in any single laundry room. I promise you both of those things are true, and I will show you why before we are done. The vet's name was Dr. Sarah Okonkwo. She had been practicing for 16 years out of a clinic in suburban Maryland, and she had seen a version of what the Merritts were describing before. Not often, but before. She ran her hands over Biscuit slowly and carefully, the way a good vet does when they are reading an animal instead of just moving through a checklist. She looked at his eyes. Specifically at his eyes, and she took her time there. And then she asked a set of questions that Diane had not expected. Not what is he eating? Not when did you last deworm him? She asked, has he been bumping into things? Walking in circles? Staring at walls? And Diane said yes. To the staring, yes. She had seen that. Biscuit standing in the kitchen facing the corner, just standing there for minutes at a time. She had thought he was being strange. Cats are strange. It had not occurred to her to call that a symptom. Dr. Okonkwo ordered a panel of blood work and a blood pressure reading, and she asked the family to leave Biscuit with her for the afternoon. What she found was this. Biscuit had feline cognitive dysfunction syndrome, and his blood pressure was high enough that she wrote the number down twice to make sure she had read the machine right. Let me tell you what those two things mean and why they matter together. Because the connection between them is the part that makes you put down what you are doing and pay attention. Feline cognitive dysfunction syndrome is, in plain language, the cat version of Alzheimer's disease. That is not a loose analogy. That is the medical community's own comparison, the one the veterinary researchers use in their papers, because the changes happening in the brain of a cat with this condition are genuinely similar to the changes that happen in the brain of a person with Alzheimer's. The same protein deposits, called beta-amyloid plaques, accumulating between nerve cells and disrupting the signals that pass between them. The same tau protein tangles forming inside the cells themselves. The same slow death of connections in the part of the brain that holds memory, recognition, and the understanding of familiar places and familiar faces. Think about what that means in practice. The cat does not stop knowing you because he has decided not to. The cat stops knowing you because the wiring that held that knowledge is coming apart. The face that meant safety and warmth and 9 years of shared mornings is still being seen. The eyes still receive the light. But the part of the brain that was supposed to match that face to a feeling, to a memory, to the whole accumulated history of 9 years of being fed and stroked and called by name, that part is dimming. The connection is still trying to form. It simply cannot find its way through anymore. The road is there, but the bridge is out. And the animal, with no way to understand why the world has become unreliable, does the only thing instinct allows. He retreats. He finds a dark corner. He waits for the confusion to pass, not knowing that it will not pass, that this is what the world is now. It is heartbreaking for reasons that go well past the cat. Now here is where the blood pressure enters, and this is the part Dr. Okonkwo explained carefully, because it was the part the family needed to understand most. High blood pressure in cats, and it is far more common than most people know, is one of the primary drivers that accelerates cognitive decline. The connection is the same one that exists in human medicine and is well established in both. Chronic elevated blood pressure damages the small blood vessels throughout the body. In the brain, those small vessels are the pipelines carrying oxygen and nutrients to every cluster of nerve cells doing the work of memory and recognition. When those vessels are damaged over months and years, when the flow is reduced or irregular, nerve cells begin to die faster than they otherwise would. The plaques build faster. The tangles form sooner. The decline that might have taken years at a gentler pace goes faster, and the retreat behind the dryer comes earlier. Biscuit had been living with high blood pressure, undetected, for what Dr. Okonkwo estimated was likely a year or more. And nobody had known, not because the family had been careless. They were not careless. They loved this animal. He saw the vet once a year. He was vaccinated and current on everything. They noticed when he was off his food. They were exactly the kind of attentive owners a cat could hope for. But there is no way to know what a cat's blood pressure is without measuring it. There is no symptom that is obvious and specific to it. A mildly hypertensive cat looks like a cat. He eats. He sleeps. He does his cat business. He may be a little more irritable, a little more easily startled, but these things are easy to attribute to age or personality. The measurement takes 4 minutes. Nobody asked for it. Diane sat in that exam room and heard all of this, and she asked the question I would have asked. She said, "If we had caught the blood pressure a year ago, would he still know us?" Dr. Okonkwo paused before she answered. She said she could not promise that, because cognitive dysfunction has its own momentum and its own course in every individual animal. But she said honestly that, yes, early treatment of high blood pressure in cats can slow the progression of cognitive decline significantly. That for many cats, when the pressure is brought down and kept down, the confusion lessens. The brain, under less assault, holds on to more of what it has. The existing connections, the ones that have not yet been lost, have a better chance of surviving. The family had lost a year they could not get back. I am not saying that to be cruel. I am saying it because it is true, and because the honest telling of it is the only thing that makes it useful to anyone else. That year existed. The blood pressure existed during it, running high and doing damage while Biscuit stood in corners and Diane told herself he was just being strange. That is the cost of not knowing, not negligence. Ignorance. Correctable ignorance, if someone tells you the thing you need to know. So let me be the one to tell you. This is what cognitive dysfunction in cats actually looks like from the outside, and this is why it is so easy to miss. The condition has an acronym in veterinary medicine, DISHA, and it stands for 5 categories of change: disorientation, interaction changes, sleep and wake cycle disruptions, house soiling, activity changes. Some practitioners add anxiety and learning and memory problems to extend it further. but those 5 letters cover the core of what you will see. Let me walk through each one honestly, because every single one of them is something you have probably already written off as just getting old. Disorientation is what the Merritts saw first, though they did not name it. Biscuit standing in corners, getting into a room and appearing not to know why, bumping the edge of the food bowl as though he had misjudged its location, when he had found that bowl without a thought for 9 years, hesitating at doorways he had been walking through for the entire span of his life. A cat who seems to have briefly forgotten the layout of a house he has lived in since he was 10 weeks old. You will write this off as aging clumsiness, as vision changes, as the general wobble of an older animal. Pay attention instead. These are the small, early signals. They cost nothing to notice. They cost a great deal to miss. Interaction changes are the most heartbreaking of the 5, and the most commonly misread. A cat who was affectionate and becomes withdrawn. Who used to come when you entered a room, and now leaves when you enter a room. Who used to sleep against your leg and now sleeps in places where you are not. That is one face of it. But there is another face that surprises people, which is the opposite. A cat who was always independent and self-contained and becomes suddenly clingy, vocal in a way they were not before, following you from room to room with an anxious quality to it, not the loose, easy following of a companion, but something more urgent, as though they are afraid of losing sight of you. Both of these, the withdrawal and the anxious attachment, are the same thing in different nervous systems, the brain losing its bearings, and the animal responding according to its individual temperament. Neither one is what it appears on the surface. Sleep and wake cycle disruptions. Cats sleep a great deal. We know this and accept it, and it makes this symptom easy to dismiss. But there is a difference between a cat sleeping 18 hours in a sunbeam and a cat who is awake and pacing and crying at 2 in the morning. Nighttime vocalization in older cats, that particular sound that comes through the wall at 3 a.m., low and repetitive and without obvious cause, is one of the most commonly reported symptoms of cognitive dysfunction and one of the most commonly ignored. People assume hunger, cold, the general eccentricity of an aging animal. Sometimes they are right. But if the nighttime calling is new, if it is happening in an animal who never did it before, and if it is appearing alongside any of the other signs on this list, it deserves a conversation with a vet rather than a pillow over your head. House soiling. A cat who has been reliable with the litter box for a decade and begins having accidents elsewhere in the house. This is the symptom people are quickest to blame on something external. New litter, wrong box. Wrong location, box not clean enough. And sometimes, genuinely, it is one of those things. But in an older cat who is also showing other changes, it can be the brain failing to process the signal in time. The message is sent. It does not arrive when it needs to. This is the same mechanism that causes incontinence in people with advancing dementia, and it warrants the same kind of compassion and the same kind of attention, rather than frustration. Activity changes. This is the broadest category. A cat who stops grooming the way she always has, or grooms compulsively and obsessively, focusing on the same spot over and over. A cat who used to play and shows no interest in anything that used to excite her. A cat who was communicative and goes quiet, or one who was quiet and becomes persistently vocal. Increased startle responses at sounds and movements that never bothered her before. A quality of generalized anxiety that settles over the animal and does not lift. The cat who used to walk into a room and own it, who now walks in and seems unsure whether to stay. The age at which this begins may surprise you. The research on feline cognitive dysfunction, and there is considerably more of it than the general public tends to know, because this is an active area in veterinary neurology, suggests that measurable cognitive changes can begin in cats as young as 10 or 11. Not severe changes, not the laundry room stage, but measurable, documented, confirmed with testing. The studies that have examined cats in the 10 to 15 age range find cognitive dysfunction signs in roughly a quarter to a third of cats between 11 and 14. In cats 15 years and older, that number climbs above 50%. More than half of elderly cats are showing some degree of cognitive decline. Which means there are a lot of biscuits out there, right now, in laundry rooms and under beds and behind furniture in houses where the family is explaining it to themselves as just old age, and wondering why the cat who used to greet them at the door no longer meets their eyes. And the other thing the research consistently finds, the thing that connects back to what Dr. Okonkwo told Diane in that exam room, is that concurrent health conditions accelerate the decline dramatically. High blood pressure is the primary one, but it is not alone. Kidney disease, which is extraordinarily common in cats over 12 years old, is another. The kidneys and the cardiovascular system are deeply intertwined, and as kidney function declines, blood pressure tends to climb, which then stresses the brain further. Hyperthyroidism, an overactive thyroid gland, is another condition extremely prevalent in older cats, and it too drives up blood pressure and puts the cardiovascular system under strain. Diabetes, chronic pain from arthritis, which most people do not realize is common in cats, because cats do not limp and cry the way dogs do. They simply slow down and hide and become quieter. Any condition that is stressing the body is a condition that is stressing the brain alongside it. Every one of these conditions is detectable. Every single one of them is identifiable with routine blood work and a blood pressure measurement, and every one of them is at least partially manageable with treatment, meaning the damage they do can be slowed and the quality of life preserved if someone catches them. The problem is that these conditions are frequently undetected in older cats because the visits to the vet get less frequent as the cat ages, not more frequent, which is exactly backward from what the animal needs. A young healthy cat with no concerns can see a vet once a year and be fine. An older cat, 10 and above, benefits enormously from twice-yearly wellness visits, and from blood work at those visits, and from blood pressure monitoring as a routine matter. The American Association of Feline Practitioners has been publishing guidelines recommending this for years. The data behind it is real. The awareness among the general public has not kept up. People still treat the annual shot appointment as sufficient, and for a cat developing hypertension and beginning cognitive changes, it is not. Biscuit got his diagnosis. The family got a treatment plan. He was started on a medication called amlodipine, which is a calcium channel blocker that manages blood pressure in cats through the same mechanism it uses in people. It takes a few weeks to reach its full effect and requires monitoring, but it is well tolerated by most cats and it works. Dr. Okonkwo also recommended a supplement called SAMe, which stands for S-adenosyl methionine, and which you can find at any pharmacy under various brand names. In cats and dogs, it is shown in multiple studies to support neurological function, protect liver cells, and have some antioxidant effect in the brain. It is not a cure. Nothing is a cure. But in an aging animal whose brain is under oxidative stress, the evidence for its benefit is solid enough that most veterinary neurologists recommend it. Dr. Okonkwo also talked to them about something called environmental enrichment, which is the clinical term for keeping an aging brain engaged through the world around it. Puzzle feeders, the kind where the cat has to work slightly to get the food out of a maze or a series of compartments, stimulate problem-solving and keep the brain making new connections. Wand toys and feather toys used by a human who is actively playing with the animal, not a toy left on the floor, provide both physical movement and social interaction, which has its own neurological benefit. Vertical space, a cat tree, or a set of shelves the cat can choose between, matters more than you might think for a cat's sense of security and orientation. Having the option to be high, to survey the room from above, is deeply built into the feline brain. An older cat who has lost that option and can only exist at floor level, where everything is taller and more threatening, is a more anxious cat in a way that is not trivial. She talked to them about nightlights, which sounds almost too small to be worth mentioning but is not. A cat with cognitive decline navigating a dark house at night is a more confused and frightened animal than the same cat in a gently lit one. The brain is already working harder to map the world. Removing one additional obstacle to that mapping helps. A simple plug-in nightlight in the hallway costs $1 and requires nothing. If your older cat seems more restless or distressed at night, before you do anything else, try a nightlight. It will not fix everything. It may help considerably. And she talked to them about consistency. This is the hardest one. When an animal begins to seem not to recognize you, every instinct in a loving person drives toward closing that gap. To go to the animal, to be demonstrative, to pick the cat up and hold him close and say with your whole body, "It is me. I am still here. You know me." And this is love, and it is completely understandable. And in a cat with cognitive dysfunction, it registers as a threat. An unfamiliar creature is approaching, fast and close, in a way the animal did not choose. The brain that cannot process familiar faces cannot process this as comfort, It processes it as danger, and the animal goes further away, not closer. The approach that meant love has pushed the animal back into the laundry room. What actually helps is the opposite of what instinct demands. Stillness, predictability, being in the same place at the same time, doing the same things, day after day, so that the pattern becomes familiar even when the face cannot be placed. Letting the cat approach you, not the other way around. Giving the animal the time and the space to rediscover you at a pace its damaged brain can manage, which may be very slow indeed, and meeting it where it is, rather than where you wish it were. This is harder than it sounds, and I do not want to minimize that. Sitting quietly while an animal you love looks at you like a stranger, while it looks through you, and waiting, and holding still, and trusting a process that you cannot see the progress of, asks more of a person than most situations ask. It requires you to set aside what you feel for what the animal needs. That is the ask. Some people manage it easily. Most people find it genuinely difficult. Clara, who was 11 years old at the time, understood it intuitively, in a way that her parents found remarkable. Without being told to, without anyone explaining the neuroscience or the strategy, she began sitting on the laundry room floor each evening with a book, not reaching in, not calling to Biscuit, not trying to coax or cajole or accelerate, just being there, close enough that he could hear her breathing and smell her, reading her book, in the way that an 11-year-old reads with one eye on the page and one ear on the world around her, present without pressure. After about 2 weeks of this, Biscuit came out from behind the dryer and sat a few feet away from her. He did not approach further. He did not purr. He just sat there in the way that cats sit, gathered, watching. But he came out. Diane, who was watching from the doorway, walked into the kitchen so that Clara would not see her cry. 3 months into treatment, Biscuit was sleeping on the end of Clara's bed again. Not every night. His blood pressure took several months to reach and hold the target range, and the cognitive dysfunction did not reverse, because it does not reverse. The nerve cells that were lost stayed lost. The plaques did not dissolve. But the progression slowed, measurably, in the way a vet can track it through behavioral observation and repeat cognitive assessments. And in the calmer chemistry of a brain no longer under the sustained assault of uncontrolled hypertension, some of the connections that remained began to consolidate. He started using the litter box reliably again. He stopped startling at familiar voices the way he had been doing. He let Diane pick him up, and one evening, about 4 months in, he walked up to Clara's father, who had been among the last people Biscuit had seemed to recognize, and he put his forehead against the man's ankle and stood there for a moment. Just once, and not for long, and then he walked away in the entirely unconcerned manner of a cat who has made a gesture and feels no need to repeat it. Her father sat down on the kitchen floor. I tell you all of this one family and this one orange cat in a laundry room in Maryland, because it is a common story, told quietly, in houses and in waiting rooms and in comment sections late at night, where people type, "Our cat of 15 years has started acting like he doesn't know us, and we don't understand what happened." That story exists in thousands of places right now, and in most of those cases, nobody has named cognitive dysfunction. Nobody has checked the blood pressure. The family grieves the loss of who the animal was, and eventually they grieve the animal himself, and the thing that was happening in his brain the whole time, the thing that was absolutely addressable, goes unnamed and unmanaged. I want to change that, even a small amount, even for one family. So let me tell you the practical things, the specific things, the things you can do this month if you have a cat who is 10 years old or older. The first thing is to know the number. Ask your vet to measure your cat's blood pressure at the next visit if you have not had it done recently. The measurement involves a small cuff, typically placed around the leg or the tail, and it works on the same principle as the cuff around your arm at the doctor's office. The cat tolerates it, generally, about as well as most cats tolerate anything, which is to say, with varying degrees of dignity. Normal blood pressure for a cat runs in the range of 120/80 at the middle of ideal, and anything consistently above 160 systolic is considered hypertension in cats and warrants treatment. The specific numbers are less important to memorize than the principle. You cannot know what it is without measuring it. The measurement is quick and inexpensive. It should be happening at every senior wellness visit, and if it is not, you can ask for it to be. The second thing is to ask for a senior blood panel. A complete blood count and comprehensive chemistry profile will catch kidney disease, liver changes, thyroid abnormalities, diabetes, anemia, and several other conditions that are common in older cats and that all connect to brain health in the ways I described. These panels are not expensive relative to what they catch. They typically run between $60 and $150 depending on the practice, and in the context of what goes undetected and untreated without them, they are among the most useful investments in your pet's late life quality that you can make. Ask for this annually at minimum from age 10 and twice yearly from 12 on. The third thing is to start watching differently. You have been reading your cat for years. You know his normal better than any vet who sees him once a year ever could. That knowledge is actually the tool here. I want you to add one specific thing to what you are watching for. When your cat looks at you, watch what happens in the half second after. Does he orient toward you the way he always has? Move in your direction. Make his sound. Begin the approach that says, "I know exactly who you are." Or is there a beat of hesitation that was not there before? A fraction of a second where something is being processed that used to be immediate? That hesitation is not always significant on its own, but if it is new, and if it appears consistently, and if it appears alongside any of the other changes I have described, write it down. Write down the date and what you observed. Your vet cannot act on a feeling you had in October. Your vet can act on a record that shows a pattern developing over weeks. The fourth thing is the environment, which matters more in an aging brain than most people realize. If your cat is older and your house has had significant changes in the past year, new furniture, new layout, renovation, a new person or animal in the household, a move, these things hit a cognitively vulnerable animal harder than they hit a young one, because the aging brain has less capacity to remap, less tolerance for disruption, less reserve for novelty. This does not mean your life has to stop changing. It means that when things do change, you help the cat navigate them. Keep the food and water and litter box in their established locations relative to the cat's primary resting space. Use the same litter brand. Do not replace the old scratching post that has been there for 6 years with a new one. Or if you do, keep the old one available for a while. Smell is an enormous part of how an older cat orients in space, far more than most people understand. The smell of the familiar is a kind of compass for an animal whose spatial memory is degrading. Protecting that compass costs you almost nothing. The fifth thing is the one that requires the most honesty. Feline cognitive dysfunction syndrome does not have a cure. It will not be reversed by a medication or a supplement or a change in diet. The cells that are gone are gone. The connections that have been lost stay lost, and the condition will progress over time because that is what it does. What treatment accomplishes, and it genuinely accomplishes this, is slowing the progression, managing the concurrent conditions that are accelerating it, and preserving quality of life for whatever time remains. A cat in the early or middle stages of cognitive dysfunction who receives appropriate treatment for concurrent blood pressure issues and appropriate environmental and nutritional support can have good years ahead. Not a return to his younger self, not a restored perfect version of who he was at 5, but a continuation of a life worth living. A cat who knows his family most of the time and finds comfort in familiar things and still has his moments of grace. That is not a small thing. That is the goal, and it is a reachable one. The Merritts kept Biscuit for 2 more years after his diagnosis. He died in the spring of 2021 at 11 years old in Clara's lap on the living room couch on a Tuesday afternoon. He had been declining in the final weeks, sleeping more, eating less, doing the quiet withdrawal that old cats do when they are getting ready. But he had not returned to the laundry room. He had not lost his people again. He knew the sound of Clara's voice until the last week, and when she came into a room he turned toward it. Not every time, but often enough to be unmistakable. Often enough to matter. I think about what that meant to her. About what she learned. This 11-year-old girl who had taught herself to sit on a cold floor with a book and wait. Who had understood, without being told, that love sometimes looks like stillness and patience and trusting that the person is still in there even when the evidence says otherwise. That is not a small lesson. It is not a simple one. It is the kind of thing most adults spend decades trying to learn, if they learn it at all. To stay present for someone who cannot show that they know you. To give without any demonstration of return. To believe in the relationship on your own, without confirmation. because the relationship is real, regardless of whether it can be expressed. I think about what was almost lost. If the family had waited another month before going to the vet, if the vet had said old age and sent them home, if nobody had checked the blood pressure or explained the syndrome, or told them about the nightlight in the hall and the puzzle feeder, and the particular discipline of sitting on the floor with a book and not reaching, if those 2 years had been 2 years in the laundry room instead. 2 years of an animal afraid in a house that should have been his home. 2 years of a family mourning a cat who was still alive. All of it turned on knowledge, on knowing that the condition existed, on knowing what signs to name when you see them, on knowing to ask for the blood pressure measurement, on knowing that what looked like rejection from an animal you loved was not rejection at all, but an animal in distress, in a world that had become illegible to him, reaching for a map his brain no longer held. There is something I have been sitting with since I first heard this story, something that goes past the cat and past this particular family and into something larger that I want to say plainly before we are finished. We are surrounded by living things that communicate what they feel without the words to explain it. Children before they have language, animals for their whole lives, and increasingly, people we love whose words are beginning to fail them. The husband who forgets the name for the thing he is looking for and goes quiet in a way he never used to. The mother who repeats the same question 3 times in an hour and seems not to notice. The grandfather who gets up in the middle of the night and stands in the dark hallway not sure where he is. The mechanisms are different in scale and in complexity from what happened to Biscuit. I am not trying to make them the same thing. They are not the same thing. But the lesson about how to be present for a being whose ability to show that they know you has been compromised, that lesson is portable. What Clara learned on the laundry room floor is useful knowledge for a life, not just for a cat. The discipline of stillness. The faith that the relationship exists even when the other side of it cannot demonstrate it. The willingness to let the approach happen at the other person's pace, rather than your own. These are things people spend whole lifetimes in relationships failing to learn. And a girl learned them from an orange cat who stopped recognizing her and came back. I do not say that to be precious about it. I say it because it is true, and because the truest things in these stories are often the ones hiding just behind the surface. The medical facts are real and they matter, and I hope you take them seriously. The blood pressure measurement, the senior blood panel, the DISHA signs, the nightlight, these are real and practical and worth doing. But the story underneath the story is a family learning to love someone through something they could not fix, only accompany, and coming out the other side of it with something they did not have before. That is also worth taking with you. So, if you have a cat who is 10 years old or older, or if someone you know does, here is what I want you to do. Schedule the senior wellness visit. Ask specifically for the blood pressure measurement. Ask for the complete blood panel. Learn the 5 categories of change: disorientation, interaction changes, sleep cycle disruption, house soiling, activity changes, and watch for them not with anxiety, but with attention. And if your cat starts spending evenings behind the dryer, do not wait until the 5th week. Go sit on the laundry room floor. Take something to read. Make yourself comfortable. And wait. Because the animal is still in there. The map is harder to read now, and the navigation is slower, and some of the old routes no longer go through. But the destination is the same one it has always been. He is trying to find his way back to you. The least you can do is be somewhere he can find you. Tell me in the comments if you have been through something like this with an older animal, whether it was a cat, or a dog, or something else entirely. I read every single one, and so do the people sitting at their own screens right now wondering whether what they are seeing in their own house is what I just described. Your story will matter to them. It will matter more than you know. Next time, I want to talk to you about kidney disease in cats, which is the most common serious illness in cats over 12 years old, and which is almost always caught late because the early signs are so ordinary, so easy to attribute to just getting older, that most families never connect them to what is happening inside the animal until the damage is already done. There are specific things to watch for, things to ask your vet about. I will tell you all of it. Until then, sit with the animals in your house, watch their eyes, and if something has changed, trust that you noticed it, because you know them better than anyone else does. And that knowing, brought to the right person at the right time, can be the difference between the laundry room and the couch. Between 2 years lost and 2 years kept,